Hello and welcome to the unseen question. Is atheism a religion? It's a question that comes up more often than you might expect. Sometimes it's asked in good faith, out of curiosity or philosophical interest. Other times, it's framed as a gotcha, an attempt to equate disbelief with belief, and suggest they're two sides of the same coin. But what does that actually mean? What makes something a religion? And why do some people feel the need to label atheism as one? To answer that, we need to be precise, not with dictionary definitions, but with how belief systems actually function in the real world. And the best place to start isn't with labels, but with what people actually believe and do. Most religions are built around shared metaphysical claims. They posit a reality beyond the natural one: gods, spirits, souls, afterlives. They tend to include rituals, sacred texts, moral codes said to be divinely inspired, and often a strong sense of identity linked to community. In short, religion isn't just about belief in something, it's a structured worldview, often resistant to falsification. Atheism doesn't fit that mold. It makes no claims about the supernatural, only a rejection of those claims due to lack of evidence. It's not a worldview, not a code of ethics, not a social movement in itself. It has no doctrine, no clergy, no mythology, no rituals to perform. And yet, some still insist it must be a religion because they see strong convictions, passionate arguments, and people gathering in communities. But strong conviction isn't exclusive to religion. People care deeply about politics, science, human rights. That doesn't make those things religious. It's worth asking, why does this comparison come up so often? Part of it is psychological. Humans are wired to categorize. We like to put things in boxes that feel familiar. When someone encounters atheism, especially if it challenges deeply held beliefs, it's easier to say, well, that's just another kind of faith, than to confront the possibility that one worldview is built on verifiable knowledge, and another isn't. Some critics argue that atheists believe there's no God, just like theists believe there is one. But this is a misunderstanding of how belief works in relation to evidence. Atheism isn't a positive belief. It's a default position. Most people don't believe in unicorns or leprechauns, not because they have proof they don't exist, but because there's no credible reason to believe they do. The same logic applies to gods. It's not faith, it's skepticism. And there's another layer. Some people find the rise of secular thinking threatening, especially in cultures where religion has long held authority. Labeling atheism a religion can be a way to level the playing field, to suggest that all worldviews are equally based on unprovable assumptions. If they can frame science-based thinking as just another belief system, they can dismiss it just as easily. But this ignores a key difference: intellectual humility. Science, and by extension the skeptical mindset, builds an uncertainty. It says, this is what we know so far, based on the best available evidence. But we're open to changing our minds if better evidence comes along. Religion rarely grants itself that flexibility. Dogma, by definition, resists change. So if anything, atheism isn't a belief system. It's a refusal to accept one without evidence. That doesn't mean atheists don't have values or philosophies. Many embrace humanism, secular ethics, or existentialism. But those frameworks are distinct from atheism itself. You don't need a full-fledged worldview to reject unsubstantiated claims. Atheism is simply a single position on a single question. And yet, the accusation of religiosity persists, often used to undermine the legitimacy of skepticism. That brings us to a deeper question. What are people actually trying to defend when they say atheism is a religion? Usually, it's not about defining religion. It's about protecting theirs. When someone argues that atheism is a religion, it's rarely a neutral observation. It's usually a way of saying, you're just as dogmatic as we are. It puts all views on the same level, and in doing so, tries to excuse belief without evidence by claiming that no one really has evidence. But that argument falls apart under scrutiny. Dogma and doubt don't occupy the same space. A person who rejects supernatural claims because there's no compelling reason to accept them is not the same as someone who accepts supernatural claims without evidence, or even in spite of contradictory evidence. That's not two versions of the same thing. That's the difference between withholding belief and asserting it. Still, people point to things like Richard Dawkins, online forums, or secular conferences and say, see, you have your own leaders, your own gatherings. That's religious. But that misunderstands the nature of community. Gathering with like-minded people isn't uniquely religious, it's human. Chess clubs have conferences. Scientists hold public talks. Fans of Star Trek gather in full costume. None of that makes those things religions. We shouldn't confuse community or passion with faith. Being passionate about skepticism isn't the same as believing in something without evidence. In fact, it's usually the opposite. It's a commitment to standards of evidence and critical thinking. There's no sacred text being passed down, no miracles being claimed, no appeal to divine authority. If anything, the comparison cheapens the concept of religion. If anything strongly held becomes religious, then the word loses meaning entirely. There's another argument that pops up, that atheism offers a sense of identity or moral structure, and that's what makes it religious. But that flips the argument backwards. People don't become atheists to gain a moral framework. They usually already have one. In fact, many leave religion because their personal sense of ethics no longer aligns with what their religion teaches. Rejecting outdated doctrines doesn't leave a moral vacuum. It opens the door to building an ethical life rooted in empathy, shared humanity, and reason. No commandments needed. It's also important to distinguish between atheism and movements that form around it. Organized secular groups, like ethical societies or skeptic organizations, may develop structure and language around values. But those values are not drawn from divine claims. They're shaped by reason, dialogue, and a shared desire for progress. Some critics also try to say that science itself has become a kind of religion, claiming that people place blind faith in scientists the same way religious followers do with clergy. But that too is misleading. Science isn't about worship. It's a method, a way of testing claims, exposing falsehoods, and refining understanding over time. Scientists are not infallible prophets. They make mistakes, revise theories, and constantly challenge each other's ideas. That's what makes science powerful, not because it provides unchanging truth, but because it admits it never will. That humility is what separates evidence-based thinking from belief systems rooted in certainty. You don't have to swear allegiance to Darwin or Hawking to respect the explanatory power of evolutionary biology or physics. Their theories are compelling because they hold up under scrutiny, not because they're declared sacred. Ironically, one of the most unreligious things you can do is embrace uncertainty. To say, "I don't know," and actually mean it. To resist the urge to insert meaning where none has been demonstrated. That's not nihilism, it's intellectual honesty. But here's something else worth noticing. Even in secular societies, the religious label is sticky. In some U.S. tax codes, for example, atheist groups have applied for religious status, not because they believe they are religions, but because they want the same legal protections and tax exemptions afforded to churches. That's a practical move, not a philosophical one. In fact, it highlights the imbalance. Religion has special legal privileges in many places, from tax breaks to exemptions from discrimination laws. If secular groups adopt the label religious, it's often to highlight the absurdity of those privileges, not to admit they believe in gods. It's a workaround, not a concession. And yet, the idea that atheism is a religion still circulates, often passed around by those who've never really considered what atheism actually means. Part of this confusion may come from how humans naturally seek patterns. We're narrative-driven creatures. We look for beginnings, endings, purposes. Religion provides those. It offers a framework for understanding everything, where we came from, why we're here, what happens when we die. Atheism doesn't, and for some people, that absence feels threatening. A worldview without a cosmic plan can seem cold, even frightening. So when they see someone living without religion and still finding meaning, still living ethically, still forming communities and pursuing purpose, it unsettles the narrative. Labeling atheism a religion can feel like a way to pull it back into familiar territory. It makes the unfamiliar easier to digest. But the truth is, meaning doesn't require belief in something supernatural. You don't need to believe the universe has a plan to find value in your relationships, your work, your experiences. You don't need a promised afterlife to live fully in this one. And morality, it doesn't come from ancient texts. It evolves. It's shaped by empathy, by lived experience, by our ability to reason and cooperate. We know harming others causes suffering, and we act to reduce that, not because we fear punishment from a god, but because we understand the consequences. This is an abstract theory. Studies in moral psychology show that most people, regardless of belief, share similar intuitions about fairness, harm, and justice. These aren't uniquely religious values, they're human ones. In fact, many of the moral advancements we now take for granted, abolition, civil rights, gender equality, weren't led by people clinging to tradition, but by those who challenged the moral authority of religion when it failed to live up to basic human decency. History shows us that questioning religious authority has often been the catalyst for progress, not the enemy of it. So when someone claims atheism is just another religion, ask yourself, what purpose does that serve? Does it clarify or obscure? Does it foster understanding or shut down discussion? Because here's what happens when you accept that atheism is just another religion. You erase the value of asking questions. You blur the line between belief without evidence and thought based on reason. And you allow superstition to stand shoulder to shoulder with science, as if they deserve the same weight. But they don't. Atheism doesn't offer all the answers, and that's the point. It doesn't pretend to. It's not a worldview that demands your loyalty. It's a rejection of conclusions not supported by evidence. It's a willingness to say, I don't know, rather than, I believe because I must. There's a quiet strength in that. It means living with uncertainty, yes, but also with freedom. Freedom to question, to change your mind, to explore new ideas without fear of damnation or exile, to pursue truth wherever it leads, even when it doesn't promise comfort. And that might be why calling atheism a religion feels so necessary to some, because if it isn't, then it's something else entirely. It's a challenge to authority, to tradition, to the idea that belief alone makes something true. A challenge to the notion that meaning must be handed down from above, rather than built from within. That's not religion. That's liberation. And maybe that's the real discomfort. Not that atheism is a competing faith, but that it's not a faith at all. That it doesn't need to be. That you can live a full, meaningful, ethical life without gods, without dogma, without the illusion of certainty. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. Thanks for watching.